Hello and welcome, everyone. This is a little loud. To provide some context for our discussion today, I wanted to mention that on July 1st, which is less than 2 months from now, the President of the United States, the President of Mexico, and the Prime Minister of Canada are going to make a decision on whether or not to renew the USMCA agreement. Although Mexico and the United States have initiated formal negotiations, U.S. and Canada have not yet done so. To be clear, the USMCA agreement will remain in force unless one of the countries formally withdraws. None of us expect that to happen. However, the July 1st moment remains critically important for the signal it sends to the rest of the world about how important we think the North American partnership is. So today I'd like to focus not only on why USMCA renewal matters, but what's next? What else do we need to be focusing on in the future to make sure that we make this partnership as strong as it can be? We have an amazing panel today. And I'm going to just give you some brief introductions. Antonio Astiazaran is the mayor of the city of Hermosillo in Sonora, Mexico. He's going to bring to us today a public sector and a border regional perspective. And I have it on good authority that he is the only mayor ever to have been reelected in the city of Hermosillo, which is a lovely testament to how his constituents must feel about his service. Carolynne is the CEO of St. Clair Technologies, a company that makes wire harnesses for the auto industry and has business in all of the USMCA countries. She's sort of the perfect person to talk about what it's like to do business in North America because she is doing business in all 3 countries. Torabi is the CEO of Lawrence Semiconductor, an Arizona company that makes the quantum materials that are the building blocks for all these advanced compute chips that are all the rage these days. Ali brings that technology lens, and he also has recently set up an R&D center up in Montreal, and that will be a really nice opportunity for him to let us know what's been happening with that, what are the friction points, and what are the successes. Goldy Hyder, many of you know Goldy. He is the CEO of the Business Council of Canada. He works with business leaders across Canada, and he also works with their counterpart organizations in the U.S. and Mexico. He has absolutely his finger on the pulse of what the business perspective is on USMCA and the renewal conversations, and I'm really looking forward to Goldy's comments today. And finally, we have Carlo Dade. He is the University of Calgary's Director of the International Policy and New North American Initiative, which is directly on point with what we're talking about today. He's researched and published extensively on Western Canadian trade interests and brings a very valuable regional perspective to the conversation today. So please join me in welcoming all of our panelists. I'm going to start us out with a really simple threshold question. And I want each of you to give me just the yes or no. So if you're president or prime minister for a day, would you vote in favor of USMCA renewal on July 1st? Goldy?
Yes. Yes.
Absolutely yes.
Carlo?
I don't know.
Absolutely yes.
Yes.
Okay, so a significant majority of our panelists, that would be 80%, believe USMCA renewal is good for North America. And by the way, that it exactly reflects the outcome of the public comment process in all 3 countries, right? Everybody uniformly across the 3 countries, there's broad support. That does not mean that there aren't places for improvement, that there aren't areas where people have real concerns about how to clarify, how to align, and how to enhance the North American I was about to say NAFTA, sorry, USMCA. That kind of gives you a feel for exactly how long I've been doing this. But there's broad consensus. That's the main point. There's broad consensus that North America is stronger with USMCA agreement than without it. So the real question is, what else must happen for North America to take the greatest advantage of this agreement and become the most competitive and the strongest trading bloc in the world? Goldy, help us to understand what happens on July 1st if we don't renew, both sort of the mechanics of that and also what signal you think that sends.
Well, look, thanks for the question. Look, we're in uncharted waters to some extent, right? Because this agreement, when it was signed, the United States insisted on this 6-year review process. Frankly, Mexico and Canada didn't want it. But now we have it, and we're working our way through it, and you're seeing how it's functioning. Basically, it's becoming an exercise, to be clear, not a renegotiation of an agreement, but a review and renewal of an agreement that's 5.5 years old. So there's not a lot to review and renew, but there are clearly issues where all sides, it's not just America and Mexico or America and Canada, but Canada, Mexico, US, everybody has some issues that they would like to discuss about how the agreement has been implemented over the last 5 years. Sometimes you sign things and you think I'm signing one thing and someone thinks they're signing someone else. There's a chance to get some clarity. So the process has been very clear about all of this, and we've been really led by the USTR, which continues to function in a way in which it did in the past. It's not unusual that that United States talks to Mexico separately and the United States talks to Canada separately because the issues are different for each of our countries. But they will merge ultimately in the process of reviewing and renewing the agreement, because the first question I have for people is, what's the alternative? No agreement? What does no agreement mean? No agreement means tariffs, for starters. But remember, the USMCA has got 34 chapters to it. It affects a lot more of our lives than just tariffs. It affects our communications, affects our transportation, our travel, all kinds of different, our security, banking, you name it. Things are inside that agreement. So nothing is not an alternative. What we're working towards now is withdrawal. I don't think anyone's going to withdraw. They may even threaten withdrawal. The president might even do that, but I don't think he'll mean it. Everybody knows that the USMCA is good for America. It's good for Americans. It creates jobs. It creates, prosperity. So we've got to make sure that that message is getting out. Then you've got this scenario of bilaterals. I've just told you I don't think that will happen because that's duplication for businesses. That's more regulations, not less regulations. That's more unclarity, not more clarity. So I don't believe that will happen. The risk we all face is annual reviews. The idea that this deal is good till 2036 and that, businesses should just relax. We have the rules, that they are what they are, and we're going to talk about it every year. Well, as you just heard Jean say, we prefer that you just tell us what the rules are and then get out of our way and let us decide how to deploy capital, create jobs, create prosperity. So we've got to be very conscious of the risk of this constant negotiation, this perpetual dialogue year after year after year, because capital has no loyalty to any nationality or to any country or to any ideology. It moves to the path of least resistance. And if we're not careful, we will find that out pretty quickly here in North America.
So in terms of the signal to the rest of the world, you think the signal is a poor one if we don't move forward with renewal? And I, for one, don't know. There's a lot of people in this room that have been working really hard this past year. I think I saw Eva back there with the Arizona-Mexico Commission. A lot of folks have worked really hard for this renewal outcome, right? And I, for one, don't want to do it again. I don't want to spend the next year doing all this all over again. I want us to say yes and then figure out how we can get so much better as a region. Carolynne, tell us what USMCA, how it's been important for North American manufacturers, especially for St. Clair.
Sure. Thank you. Sorry. Let me start with this. I'm kind of unique on this panel because I'm the CEO of a mid-sized company, quite small in comparison to many of the people in the room. We're a 75-year-old manufacturing company owned by the same family for those 75 years. And we have been successful because we're able to plan. That's core to our existence. We're in the automotive industry, which is very volatile, and we're able to use we started with US FTA between Canada and the US, expanded it to NAFTA, moved on now to USMCA, CUSMA, TMEX, wherever you are. And we're using the format of that to make our decisions. Obviously, we are enthusiastically embracing a continuation of this program. Our supply chain is entrenched. It has been created over the 30 years of this agreement. And we believe that while there are things that could be changed within the agreement, adaptations, we enthusiastically endorsed the new chapter on SME in the original signing of the USMCA. Not considering the impact of walking away from this agreement is so short-sighted in terms of the impact that it would have on SMEs. Many, many of these companies do not have the capital, the resources to shift with the speed at which they would need to shift in order to stay viable. I'm not talking about companies that might take a hit to their bottom line. I'm talking about companies that may not exist any longer. So we are huge advocates for the USMCA. Obviously, that's why I'm here. And I think that the key is ignore the headlines, or as much as you can possibly do that. Ignore the headlines. In every country, all of the leadership is going to posture. They're going to try to enthusiastically embrace the patriotism that comes with America First, or, you know, the New World Order in Canada and those things. Stay focused as a business unit on what works, and the USMCA works. By and large, it works exceptionally well for businesses to prepare, to create strategies, and to execute.
Just quickly, Carolynne, even the prior panel talked a little bit about how sensitive SMEs are to this situation right now. If USMCA were to go away for you, or to be so riddled with tariff holes that you couldn't function, what happens to your company?
Well, I've been accused of being alarmist, but the truth is I don't know that we would survive. We're in a very, very competitive market. Certainly, we have been pushing all of the levers that we have access to maintain the duty-free status of product which is qualified under USMCA. The 232 and 301, 122 tariffs that have been imposed, I can talk about those at length. I'm sure you don't want me to do that at this stage. But I think that there's a very real chance that my $100 million company with 1,165 employees would cease to exist.
Carlo, many on the panel support USMCA renewal. But in your publications, you've stated that USMCA renewal should not be pursued at any cost. Assuming renewal on July 1st or later, what is the single biggest problem North America would still need to resolve?
Right. So, yeah, I think I first need to make it clear that we and the group of people whom I think I'm mostly representative, those who deal with deep data, quantitative analysis of the agreement, rigorous analysis of the facts, we all favor a North American agreement. So the question, I think, as you put it, is what sort of agreement do we have? Very quickly to Goldy's point about what would happen if we don't have an agreement, the work that we're doing in academia and elsewhere is giving us an answer. And the consensus that's emerging is, for Canada, a 1.4 to 1.8% one-year hit to GDP. So we are starting to gather some precision. We're also identifying specific sectors, specific businesses, and we're gaining the ability to be able to think proactively to develop scenarios for policy responses. So the lack of knowledge, the fear of the unknown is slowly being replaced with solid, rigorous quantitative data that will allow us, I think, to have better responses. What do we need? Well, I think simply, we need to avoid the mistake that 19 other economies made in negotiating with this administration. We have facts and evidence from those agreements, frameworks, handshakes, et cetera, as to what a future NAFTA, a future USMCA would look like. I think everyone likes NAFTA, but will we like what's coming? You can look at the 19 agreements and gain a sense. Two things I think are emerging for which we need responses. One, baseline tariff. 19 agreements, 19 baseline tariffs. We're not as special as we think we are in North America. We need to think about that and mitigation measures for businesses on that. The second point is to think beyond the agreement. If we have a baseline tariff, we lose the relatively modest tariff advantage we had, but we maintain other forms of comparative and competitive advantage. Regulatory harmonization, and we've dropped the ball on regulatory harmonization. If we have the same rules for certifying products, for moving products, for exchanging goods at the border, we have an advantage over every other country that's stuck also with baseline tariffs. So what we need to do, have a plan for something we hope doesn't happen, as the previous guest said, but we also need to think beyond the agreement. This is a time for creative thinking, and we have a lot in North America beyond the agreement that will allow trade to continue and the countries to continue to prosper.
Great, thanks, Carlo. Ali, can you give us a little bit of background on Lawrence Semiconductor, including whether USMCA is working for you or maybe where it's not?
Sure. Thanks, Carol. Good morning, everyone. So I'll come at it from a relatively simple perspective from where we are at Lawrence Semiconductor, and that is, from our perspective and for the type of business we run, renewing and modernizing makes the most sense because we're one of those potential statistics. We're even smaller than Carolynne's company. We have been around for about half the time, only 34 years, not 75. But it's been truly enabling USMCA in two ways for our company, and it's allowed us to survive and thrive as a business. So just as some background for all of you, because most people haven't heard of Lawrence Semiconductor, we've been operating here in Arizona for 34 years, founded in 1992 in Tempe, and we're a specialized semiconductor materials company providing R&D services and foundry production. So we're at the foundational layer of chip technology where we help our customers develop advanced new chips and sensors at the materials level as a service. And for some of those companies, we operate as their specialty foundry. So we have customers all over the world, most friendly countries, so to speak, and in many in Canada. So in our customers range anywhere from startups, universities, national laboratories to the largest chip manufacturers and foundries in the world. So we're part of the defense industrial base. We're part of the quantum computing ecosystem. For over 15 years, we've been supplying materials for an increasingly large number of quantum computing R&D researchers at universities, but now startups that are well funded. And in that case specifically, USMCA actually has been enabling. So as that business has grown over the past 10 years, more and more startups coming out of universities throughout Canada and being funded rely on us to help them develop new silicon wafer technology, which we then ship to their respective research hubs for development and testing. And so the free trade, the tariff-free trade provisions that the USMCA offers has enabled us to, as a small business, keep pace with our customers without incurring, prohibitive costs, basically. And the other really key point here that Carol, you mentioned is it's allowing us to now grow and across the North American ecosystem, take advantage of centers of excellence, R&D hubs, and find talent where it is and manufacture where we're best suited to do that. So we recently expanded to Montreal, as you mentioned, to create an R&D hub. There's a lot of advanced quantum computing research happening in Quebec specifically. And so we created a subsidiary at the beginning of the year. We're hiring engineers there now. And the workflow mobility provisions that the USMCA offers, TN visas and the ability for our engineers to travel back and forth are also enabling. If it wasn't for that, it wouldn't be practical for a small company like ours to actually create a subsidiary in a different country in Canada and to support this R&D. And that research, because of the provisions in the USMCA that are in place, will allow us to go back and forth, both with the technology development and then eventually scale manufacturing here in Arizona. So our perspective is, again, relatively simple, but it's still important because we're not the only company like this that relies on those benefits that the USMCA offers.
I'm sorry, there you go. It sounds like it's been a good ride, but I know you've also had your struggles relative to the new R&D hub. So maybe you could share a little bit about that. Sure.
So it's not perfect, and as we all know, and again, our view is to our desire would be for it to be renewed and then modernized to reflect where technology is going. And the reality is the agreement, like most agreements that are 6 years old, haven't kept pace with what's happening in advanced computing technology, quantum computing, and AI data center components specifically. So there are a couple issues right now that we're facing that are holding up technology development and our own growth. One being the export controls. So export controls really have not kept up with the trade framework that the USMCA provides. I'll just give an example. We have several really well-funded Canadian quantum computing customers that we've been supporting for several years now, and practically every transaction with them is treated like a new export, requiring an export license that can take months, several months sometimes, to actually be approved. And that's just slowing down innovation. It's slowing down our customers' R&D. It's slowing down the growth of our business, while other geographies don't have that roadblock in place. China, of course, being the big one, with all sorts of vertical integration and internal funding, and even Europe having a more robust framework for R&D between different countries and research organizations. So we're being held back where North America should be an innovation engine with the respective countries working together, flow of technology and people back and forth. The other limitation, I would say, has been some of the outdated visa provisions, the TN visa specifically. So while the framework does provide for researchers and employees to move back and forth relatively easily, there are still some limitations when it comes to the export compliance related to deemed exports. So even though, again, we can send wafers back and forth that are once we receive export licenses, but with no tariffs, if we have colleagues coming from Canada to work with us in the U.S., just having access to some of the technology that's controlled requires an export because that's considered a deemed export. So it's really just an administrative burden. It's an extra expense. It slows down research and development when we really need to be accelerating.
Right. So there are only probably 5 people in this audience that would want to nerd out on the export control issues, but I will tell you that this is where the real work happens. These are true friction points for North American trade, and they have a lot to do with this, the balance between trade policy and now national security and export controls and industrial policy. We'll talk a little bit about that later, but I do thank you, Ali, for those comments. It's good work and it's hard work, and there's lots to be done there. Let's bring it down from the national level right now to the subnational level. That's where a lot of the hard, practical work of North American integration actually happens, with the cities, the states, the provinces, the cross-border institutions. These relationships are strong. They can be very deep. They can be based on a lot of trust that's been built up over decades. And they can often sustain the momentum that they have internally, even when the national politics get a little crazy. And we've seen that right here in the Arizona Sonora region. So let's turn to the mayor. Mayor Astiazaran, let's start with semiconductors. I know you were here for the Semicon West conference, right? And you brought a delegation. How is Hermosillo working now to build workforce, engineering talent, and supplier capabilities that are needed to support Arizona's semiconductor boom?
Thank you, Carol. I would like to say hi to panelists as well, and I would like also to say hi to the delegation from Hermosillo that came to this forum as well. Thank you for being here. I would like to begin by saying that there are some issues, as you were saying before, that are on a national level, but there are others that I think are more important, as you were saying before, in terms of the confidence that we create between regions, you know. For example, the Arizona-Mexico Commission, which is for us very important, it's been 66 years ever since it was created, the Arizona-Mexico Commission. And it actually creates an ecosystem, not only from a governmental perspective, but also from in universities and entrepreneurs as well that participate ever since 66 years ago. That means that this Arizona-Mexico Commission was created even before than the NAFTA or the USMCA trade agreement. And that tells us that this example, and also the sister city programs that we share with Phoenix as well, for example, that has been 50 years, by the way, this year between the sister cities of Hermosillo and Phoenix. That gives us an idea of how important it is, this relationship that goes for decades, even before those trade agreements. So we see what is happening here. I was, very putting a lot of attention when Mayor Gallegos was saying all the things that are happening here in Phoenix. And we see an opportunity, a very, very strong opportunity for cities like Hermosillo, because one of the lessons that COVID pandemic showed us is distance. It is a factor. And having a city with workforce, as you were saying, that we have, for example, 49 universities with 107 degrees that provide in our Hermosillo, that tells us that, that the workforce that we have in Hermosillo is as strong as any other city in the world. And one of the examples that I also mentioned, it's, for example, in the integration, when Lucid came here to Casa Grande or to Phoenix, they looked at Hermosillo as an opportunity to provide one of the, many parts of the supply chain that are already being built in Hermosillo. And actually, the biggest plant of Ford Motor Company all over North America, not only in Mexico, is located in Hermosillo as well. So we have visitors that came to Hermosillo recently because we are moving very, very fast to electromobility as well, to renewable energy, to many of the things or topics that we'll be discussing in this forum. So we are preparing, and we have been discussing this opportunity for us with the city of Phoenix, because we see, for example, companies that are being already investing here in Phoenix or are planning to come to Phoenix as well. You see, for example, opportunities for companies like Tier 2 or Tier 3 that can also consider the sister city of Hermosillo as an option for a part of the supply chain that we'll have, that has been, as I told you before, for decades before even the free trade agreement.
So it's interesting. I think the region itself provides so many interesting examples of successes, subnational successes, that really should be moved up to the national level to guide how we do North American integration in the future. Carlo, let me turn to you for the Canadian perspective on this. You've written that states, provinces, and cross-border institutions are the quiet architecture of North American integration. I love that phrase, by the way. What's one underappreciated subnational strength that we need to be paying attention to?
If we gave out bonuses in academia, I think I would have gotten
that would have been a check.
A year-end bonus for that, for that phrasing. Look, the architecture is vast, but it's largely lost in the national conversation, national media, attention, forums like this. So thanks for focusing on the subnational. Look, we've had successes regionally. You can take the Cascadia Corridor Initiative between British Columbia, Washington, and Oregon. This is a mega region that essentially has its own regional planning initiative for economic growth, for housing, for investment attraction. The border starts to melt away when you have regions that are joined in cohesive economic units. So you have a lot of that along the southern border. As we have greater lack of confidence or lack of strength in the national agreements, and as we're forced to turn to alternatives like regulatory cooperation, the subnational engagement and using those institutionalized mechanisms, it's not just one-off initiatives, but we have decades-long institutions along the borders. We have groups of the U.S. Council of State Governments. U.S. state legislators meet in Canada. We in Canada are members of the U.S. Council of State Governments. That's a hugely important forum for enforcing or implementing regulatory changes at the local level. The feds control the border, but once you get on the other side of the border, regulatory harmonization comes down to states and provinces cooperating, infrastructure, truck drivers, those sorts of investments, workforce, credential recognition, are state or provincial responsibilities. Huge caveat here. There is immense weakness as you go down from the federal to the local level. Municipalities are under-resourced. States are under-resourced. You also have regional differences. In Canada, well, the provinces are really emirates. The joke is that we're the United Emirates of Canada because the provinces are so strong. You get down to Mexico, that's not the case with Mexican states. So while this possibility exists, you have to be really careful to tie the problem to the appropriate solution at the local level, and you may need to bring more resources because your partners may not have the capacity, the data, the other resources that are needed.
Great, thank you. I think we have to pay attention to subnational success stories as we move forward in the next few years. They are important, and they're the right test beds to move new projects into. So going back up to the federal level again, USMCA renewal obviously is a very important step along a continuum of actions that Canada, the US, and Mexico all need to take together in the coming years. So let's take the remaining time to talk about what those next steps need to be to make us more competitive, more predictable, which I keep hearing is a theme, right? What are our rules? How can we develop that predictability that we all can have confidence in? And more strategically aligned as three nations in the path ahead. Carolynne, let's talk a little bit about the elephant in the room. What dissonance does it create for a North American manufacturer in the automotive sector when we say USMCA integration is key, but then we impose significant Section 232 tariffs on our USMCA partners?
Thanks, Carol.
Sort of.
Alliances are so incredibly important at a subnational level, at a federal level, at an integrated business level. So our alliances have been shaken somewhat in this last 15 months. I would say that having to take a program like USMCA and have carve-outs for specific products is not brand new. There have been tariffs on softwood lumber, there have been tariffs on tomatoes, so things have been exempted, but not as broadly as what we're seeing right now. So our position is that initially the conversation was 232 and 301 tariffs were going to apply and USMCA would not supersede them. That was a chaotic couple of days, I will say, in my offices. The decision by the U.S. government, the administration, to allow anything that qualified under USMCA, CUSMA, TMAX, to transit duty-free was embraced. every time there's another change or the threat of another change, all of us within the business industry are waiting for the other shoe to drop. It's not beneficial, in our opinion, to have a backbone of USMCA with a significant volume of carve-outs for these other tariffs. I think one of the things that we must do is recognize that the North American community is aligned because of history, because of culture, and we should embrace that. Not having Fortress North America, which is I did not get a bonus for it, Carlos, but not having a Fortress North America, an incredibly strong North America, is a mistake. Because we know that there are bad actors. We know that there are non-market economies that would love to come in and compete with us. And being able to create an environment where our alliances, our allegiances, our culture is connecting us in such a way that we want to trade with one another and we want to make it beneficial for these three parties to have a solid background is important. And it's underrepresented in the headlines. Anyone who's running a business, we recognize how important it is for our groups in the various countries to feel aligned. So obviously, I'm not an advocate for tariffs, right?
And so just because not everybody follows 232s and 301s and 122s and IEFA, I just want to make it clear that the 232 tariffs, but for 1 year in the beginning of the first Trump administration, those tariffs didn't apply within the USMCA region on steel, aluminum, copper. This is new, and it's been reasonably disruptive. And I would just want to move it over to Carlo for a second. I mean, tariffs are not new in general, but based on your recent work, what effect do you think 232 tariffs are having on confidence and credibility of the USMCA?
Well, it's an issue that the other 19 economies that have negotiated with the administration have found. They've signed agreements, including baseline tariffs, exemptions from Section 232 tariffs, or limits in most cases, and they found that those agreements would hold in the case of the UK for 2 weeks. They found that they were signing agreements that weren't worth the paper they were written on. So the agreements have not provided certainty as long as the administration maintains executive authority to implement tariffs. So this is a hugely important lesson for us going into the CUSMA review. It's a mistake to think that a new CUSMA agreement will obviate this problem. We had a specific exemption in the CUSMA agreement between Canada and the US, a side letter on Section 232 tariffs. That side letter, which was ratified by Congress, was not respected, even in words, not deeds, or actions by the government. So going forward, we're going to have to think about restraining executive authority. If we don't, we're not going to get the certainty we want. Right now, 37% by value of everything that Canada exports to the US is covered by Section 232 tariffs. There was an exemption made, I think 25% for auto parts, and that's it. So it's had a huge impact. Our average applied tariff rate has gone from 1.2% with the US to 5.1, 5.4% right now. And as the administration looks at new investigations, that applied tariff rate will continue to climb. Other countries have tried to negotiate with the administration on this. None succeeded. We did in the first negotiation, and that failed. So for businesses, moving to a baseline tariff, if the Americans will actually agree, may actually turn out to be a benefit in the longer term.
So I would just say, just to be clear, tariffs are a legitimate tool in the trade and the national security toolkit. There are times when tariffs are appropriate. I think we all agree. The real question in the path forward for North America is whether they're being used in a way that's thoughtful, balanced, and consistent with the integrated North American trade relationship that we've spent decades building. I'll give you just a second, Goldy, to add in if there's something you want to say on this topic. No? Then I'm going to give you the next question. USTR is now explicitly talking about making the benefits of USMCA accrue primarily to the parties. Okay, those words, when they use them, they're typically referring to stronger rules of origin or anti-transshipment rules or common investment protections for strategic sectors, aligned external tariff treatments. So do Canadian business leaders agree that the objective, with that objective to keep the benefits of USMCA within the partners, do they generally agree with that objective? And if so, do they agree with USMCA's articulation of the tools?
Yeah, so whatever the answers to all of the above, all of the above. Look, I think all of these questions are going to come to a head in this process as we work our way through it. And someone who's spending a lot of time on behalf of our members in the United States and in Mexico, let me just say that, look, the president has a vision for America. America first. And you know what? I don't begrudge him for that. I know I would not vote for somebody in Canada if their mandate was Canada fourth, Canada third. No, we want to be the best and aspire to be the best at what we do. Our job in North America is to ask ourselves, are we three independent, or I know there's 21 countries or whatever, but in the trade agreement, are we three independent countries, or are we trying to function a little bit more as a unit to compete not with each other as much as we have to compete with the rest of the world? That's an identity issue for North America. Who are we? What do we want to be? Are we me, myself, and I, every man, woman, child for themselves? Or is there some value in bringing together, as we have done? Remember, this started off with an auto pact between, back in the 80s. Then we brought in the free trade agreement between Canada and the United States. Then it became the North American Free Trade Agreement. Now it's the USMCA. It is an iterative journey. And so it's not a question of arriving and saying we're done here. There's always going to be challenges. There's going to be change. All we're saying from the business perspective is give us a trilateral agreement that's to be signed in a timely way that provides tariff exemptions for the things that are compliant. That's all we're asking for. If you give us that, we will have confidence to deploy capital. Yes, certainty is dead. The only certainty that exists today is uncertainty. What do you want us to do? If you want us to just keep our capital, give it to shareholders or buy back our own shares, that's what companies are going to do if they don't feel confident that there's a set of rules that are going to exist for a period of time in which we can make these decisions. Why is Phoenix doing as well as it is? You've got an environment here that attracts capital because it's saying we're going to be predictable. We're going to give you on the ground at a local level, because as much as politics is, all local, so is business. And if you have the right talent, if you have the right attitude, the mayor's remarks this morning were about collaboration. She referenced COVID, which is the last real time I think we can think about where we've kind of laid down our arms and said, wow, we've got to save lives. And we've got to think about this as we've got to save the life of North America. It's competing with actors who are not waiting for us to figure it out. They are just moving at rapid speed, and they're not only winning, they're going to beat us if we don't smarten up and get out of our own way. And so that's the message I would like Americans to deliver Americans in the administration. This is a good agreement. It works. It creates jobs for American workers. It creates, an investment climate for investment to occur. It generates prosperity. And as the midterms arrive in November, between now and then, the most important ballot question will be, what is helping keeping cost of living in check for Americans? And I ask you, what would happen to the cost of living if there was no USMCA agreement between now and then? So drive home that message. Help us help you, help us help you, so that together we can take on and compete with the rest of the world.
I'm just going to take it to a couple more points because we only have a few minutes left to go. The first is that I think we're seeing this shift overall that we're going to have to address over time where trade policy does not sit in its own lane. Trade policy is in the same lane with national security policy, with industrial policy, and it's getting more complicated. It requires more effort, and for sure, in order to succeed going forward, we're going to have that more integrated approach to all of these issues. And it does, in part, go to one of your points as well, Carlo. In semiconductors and advanced compute, you're right in the middle of all of that, Ali. So where do you see right now the biggest disconnect between these forces? And if you've got any solutions, love to hear them.
Sure. Well, first of all, I second everything Goldy said. He's absolutely right. We need it as a foundation. Renewal matters because without it, we wouldn't be doing what we are doing, and it would completely shut down our progress working with our Canadian partners and hopefully soon Mexican partners as well. But I would say it needs to be modernized. It needs to be modernized to reflect the pace of technological development that we've been seeing, especially in the past 2 to 3 years, but really over the past 10 to 15 years. So the two main limitations that we've talked about before are the technology controls, the export controls. There needs to be a streamlining and really just an opening between North America broadly for the transfer of technology to not hold up progress, and workforce mobility as well. So the visa framework needs to be updated to reflect these new technologies so that people can work and move back and forth easily. So there are models for this. It's not like this is new. Not that long ago, there were exemptions to ITAR, so International Traffic in Arms Regulations, to exempt certain types of satellite components to enable more multinational allied development and production of satellite components for commercial space. AUKUS is another example, the Australia, UK, US trilateral partnership for nuclear technology, submarine technology, and now expanding to more. So it's something that definitely can happen. It needs to happen, I would say, after renewal, and it needs to happen quickly because, as Goldy mentioned, the rest of the world's not waiting. We have everything we need here to lead and to continue to lead in advanced technology, but we need to not shoot ourselves in the foot and actually do the work together, not separately.
Perfect. Mayor, I'm going to give you 1 second. For sub-regional leaders, any words to the folks that are out there that hold positions like yours relative to USMCA?
Well, I would like to just add that once again, I think this is an opportunity for us in terms of the region that we have. We share, for example, in the case of the Sonora Mexico Commission, a lot of sun. We create, in our case, for example, we are promoting the generation of energy by sun for police cars and many of the public services fleet that we have. So there are some issues that were not considered before in the NAFTA agreement, such as energy, for example, that are for us it's an opportunity as a region. So once again, I think it's a very there are two ways to see the problem. Either these are uncertainty. Of course, nobody wants uncertainty, but we see. Also, we can face it as an opportunity for regions like the one that we share between Sonora and Arizona.
Goldy, one second. Go for it.
I think just from this morning's panel, the message of resiliency is really important. Mm-hmm. We have to fight through the challenges that we have, and I wouldn't bet against North America if we figure it out.
Perfect. We're out of time, so in closing, I would just say we share the same continent. We share the same democratic values. We're fortunate, really, beyond measure, to call each other neighbors and allies. So we really just need to figure our stuff out and get this agreement passed so that we have this, not passed, it's the wrong word, I'm sorry, renewed, so that we can have this certainty and then focus in on the real work that needs to come over the course of the next several years to build the infrastructure and the relationships and all the other bits that allow us to be what we can be, which is the most exceptional trading bloc in the world. Thank you.